Hey, this is Mithy, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Now, the new LCK format might leave a sour taste in your mouth. That's unpleasant and unsatisfying. But you know what? Gamersup's Sakura Splash will leave a delicious sour flavour that's refreshing and invigorating. You can get 10% off using the code Thorin, Thorin, at gamersupps.gg. By the way, if you want to know about other sponsors I have, just always check out my pinned tweet on Twitter/X. So LCK is arguably the best League of Legends league in the world. Obviously, that is debated depending on if we're talking about regional strength or the base of the field. But you think about it historically, it is the league in League of Legends, probably the most important one, the most revered one, the most respected one, the most famous one. It is the home region and league to the region that has the most world championships in the history of the game and the majority of the greatest players of all time. Therefore, it's a very important competition in terms of how it is formatted, how they compete against each other, who gets to play when and in what setting, and how much it counts for. And quite frankly, it has always had at least a good format until this year. But there were major format overhauls for this year that have ruined a number of core storytelling, historical, and even viewership angles for the LCK. So, before I explain this year's format, you need a quick overview of the history of OGN Champions / the LCK, which if you don't know, actually just stands for League of Legends Champions Korea, to incorporate the Champions element of it, because Riot Korea took it away from OGN as it was their competition before. They just became the people operating the league, and eventually there was even that whole thing, wasn't there, the drama with them and Sport TV, but that's for another day, isn't it? So the league began, as I'll show you here, all the way back in 2012. It actually, a lot of people don't know, began with a little 4-team invitational tournament, which was won by Loco Doco's Mig Frost over CLG with Doublelift. Then they had the first proper Champions season. That was the spring one here, where Blaze with Reapid shockingly upset Frost, which actually got Loco kicked, by the way. Then you had the summer one, which is the one that was almost won by CLG, EU, and Froggen. And then basically, for the next 2 years, you had... This one was obviously just an invitational. So you had 2 splits in the first year. Then for the next 3 years, you had 3 splits. You had a winter split. Macnoon won that one, which was the crazy format, by the way, that had a semi-finals where it was best of 2 best of 5s, but then a best of 5 final only. What a weird format. And a different kind of a round-robin group stage. Then you had the 3 splits here, which were like group stages with 2 groups separate that then qualified you into a playoffs, which was just one single elim bracket. For 2 years, you had it like that. And essentially, this was a tournament. It wasn't a league even. It had a small round-robin component, which is sort of like a league. But it was really a tournament, wasn't it? Think of more like how a Counter-Strike tournament or something like Worlds works. Then so I'll actually show you one of these just for an example. Let's look at the one that was won by MVP Ozone over Blaze. The first split, actually Faker played, if you don't know. So this is one where you had these 2 different groups. You play everyone. This was actually back, I think, when you played like a BO2 or something crazy like that. And then you went into the playoffs, so it was all BO5s. It was just a single in bracket. And you had a 3rd place decider. Then you came along and it became LCK. So first of all, the 2 teams were told you can have sister teams. So they merged their talent together. Obviously, loads of the talent from the top 2 teams, for example, in the world, Blue and White of Samsung, they went off to the LPL and the famous Korean Exodus. And so for the first season, what you got was this format. You got a format where you'd reduce the teams down to 8. And then what you did was you played 1 round robin with 2 rounds of it. 2 rounds of round robin. So famously, the soon-to-be Rocks Tigers actually were the first place in that one, but obviously shit the bed in the playoffs. Then you went into a playoffs that was just a gauntlet. It was just a gauntlet. And so if you were the GE Tigers, you just waited in the final. The only match you played was 1 BO5. In this case, you lost, so you didn't even get to win 1 playoff game. CJ, that was the 3rd team, for example, got to go through 2 and would have had 3 best of 5. So already that was weird anyway, because it meant that, like, for example, that's one of the reasons Faker's played so many epic games. You never would have seen that epic game 5 against CJ, by the way, or whichever one it was that he carried on the LeBlanc. Might have been game 4, actually. Maybe it was the other way around. Maybe game 5 was the one carried by Bang. I forget. One of them was the Lucian carry, though. That, by the way, made this guy's entire fucking career. People never shut the fuck up talking like he did that all the time. He didn't. So then in the finals, he famously didn't even get Faker playing. This is one where Easy Hoon played and they still beat G Tigers. You get that scenario, but that's one of the reasons why I always didn't like this. I want the other side of the bracket too, or I want an upper bracket fact. So you had that for a long, long time. That was for years and years. Then we came... You keep going all the way up, like I'll show you all the way. We're all the way up into 2019 now, boys. Still the same thing. By the way, now Griffin's doing the Rocks Tigers. They just come first in the split, go straight to the finals, losing the final to T1, who clutch it out and come from the gauntlet, and Griffin just gets to play one series. It's why there was a famous stat that before this finals here, where Rocks Tigers lost to T1, there was a stat that when they were there, Peanut, who was the new jungler for Rocks Tigers, had only won something like 1 BO5 ever in his career. Because he'd played like one with Najin and then he just went straight to the finals and lost. And it also meant when you win as Rocks Tigers, like here, again, you just play 1 BO5. Now, the quick explanation I'll give as to why I hate that type of a format is, think of Michael Jordan in the NBA playoffs. Think of Wayne Gretzky in the NHL playoffs. Imagine if, when the playoffs began, their teams were first in the regular season, so they just waited in the Stanley Cup or the NBA Finals. And then if you get there, you get to play them only in the finals. So for Michael Jordan, by the way, that means for 6 seasons, actually, I'm not sure if they would have been first. Yeah, they would have been first in the East, I'm pretty sure. They would only have the conference final in this analogy, I guess, and then the finals. So you would have loads of amazing Michael Jordan games, wouldn't exist. You wouldn't get to see him be excellent against those first and second round opponents. That's what the LCK did. So already I had issues with that. But you know what? They had a very sturdy regular season. At least it was BO5s the whole way. And whatever. It was all about just building up into the epic final. It wasn't the best, but it was still good. Then what happened was you got to 2021. And for 3 splits, they did a different approach. What they changed was you had the normal league part, and then you came to the playoffs, and in the playoffs, it was a single elim bracket, but the top 2 seeds skipped to the semis. 3, 4, 5, 6 play a quarterfinal. So it's essentially like you have an extra match here, but DK took a bye, and then fucking Gen.G got a bye. The top seed, so in this case, it would have been DK, down 1. They get to pick after these 2 matches, which of the 2 opponents that wins do you want to play? So in this case, they chose Chovy's Hand of Life because it wasn't a very good team, and Chovy and Def were hard carrying it. Whereas obviously you don't want to pick T1, who is still dangerous. Like this is when they're starting to get that roster together with Teddy, etc., and carry it. They've got a bunch of the players, they just don't have Zeus in the lineup yet. And so obviously you pick the weaker opponent, as is traditionally the case. Shout out KT one time, although they did think they were picking the weaker opponent, to be fair. And then the other team just has to play whoever. So then you do that, and it's just single elim to the final, and you win. Now, they did this for 3 splits, most famously ending 2022 LCK spring playoffs. And the reason why it's famous that it ended after spring is that's the last title T1 and Faker ever won in the LCK. Because they got to go here. Amazingly, it was KDF, even though, by the way, that DRX team later the year won Worlds. They got to pick KDF over, obviously, fucking Damwon, who was still at least had Canyon and fucking Showmaker, some sick players. I think it's even the split where they got back Naguri, isn't it? No, Birdall. And T1 wins this one. It's single elimination. But from summer onwards, that's when Chovy won, and then Chovy continued to win, and T1 never won again. By the way, I already made a video about T1 not ever winning a double M tournament, and Chovy having won loads of them. Go check that out if you want to. So if we go to the 2022 summer, this is where... Oh, no, sorry, I got it wrong, actually. The first one was won by Gen.G, even in the old format. It's just that T1 didn't win it. That's right. But this is also when Gen.G was number 1 in the split. And then when you go to 2023, this is the first time they make it double elim. So the upper bracket's the same. They just added a lower bracket. So you have the same thing over here. So this time, at the first split, it was T1 picking KT. T1 picks KT because, in theory, Hand of Life's more scary. And you have a double elim. So actually, T1 won the upper bracket, that one. By the way, that means, in the old format, that would have just been T1 winning another title. That was the exact same as what a year previously spring was like. Because it was in a lower bracket, you got, first of all, little KT run shockingly over Hanwha Life, by the way. And then Gen.G actually got to go to a final from the lower bracket. And then they beat T1 in 4 games. And then Chovy's sort of dynasty in the LCK began. So that format lasted for 2 years. It was 2 splits in 2023. It was 2 splits in 2024. And then this year, we came to this new format where you can see what's going on here. Why is there a million tournaments? So let's go and look at this, because this is going to be significant. So the change was, you got this thing, first of all, called the LCK Cup. Oh, that's cool. There's a third tournament, kind of like the old days where you had the winter split in Champions. Oh, we're going to have 3 tournaments. That's awesome, because we had to compete. And since there's a new international tournament, a third international tournament called First Stand, kind of reminds me of the old MSI format. We get to qualify a team there and see even more international games. Awesome. We're going to even get an extra playoffs. Actually, asterisk, we're not getting an extra playoffs. As you'll find, in fact, we've reduced the amount of playoffs that count to LCK, as we'll get to in a second. So this was giving off OGN vibes, wasn't it? The problem immediately became, as people found out during this particular COP, was there was a time where on Reddit, you might remember, people said Faker's played 1,000 games or whatever in Korea or something. And everyone was like, wow, 1,000, what a milestone. Except what we found out was actually the stats from LCK Cup don't count to LCK stats. They essentially don't exist. So even though people try to do this record here, which by the way is what happened similarly around, it was like the same number bizarrely months earlier. It was explained, I can't show you the clip from the broadcast because actually LCK and OGN famously like to do copyright strikes if you do anything with their content. But you can certainly see this here, and this is all accurate. They didn't count this. Now, listen, I saw that tournament. It was a real tournament. It wasn't EWC, not run by Riot, but it means that I sort of count it, but it doesn't sort of officially count in the same way as an LCK title. In fact, it's more akin to tournaments they had a long time ago, I won't bother showing you, called the Kesper Cups, which were pre-season tournaments, where famously T1 actually used to lose quite a lot. The Super Team beat them in 2017. You go back before that, that ESC Ever team bizarrely won one time. You had a whole bunch of different teams win those. That was actually one of those tournaments in which... or was it WCG qualifier? I think it might have been WCG qualifier, where like Samsung, it was actually Samsung Blue at the time that had Pawn, who famously beat Faker, and everyone's like, oh my God, they're beating Faker. Well, here's another detail. T1 themselves had even said in a tweet that they were thinking that they might not even compete in the LCK Cup. And that was just thought of as a pre-season tournament. Despite that, good to have another tournament, right? The problem was you went back to an old OGN champion style format where you play these 2 separate groups of round robins. And this is where it gets bizarre. So T1 lost one series. Hanwha lost 2. DK won all 5. And then Gen.G went 3-2. But bizarrely, look how this works. Because teams play against all teams from the opposite group once. What? Why are we doing groups then? Okay. The group with, listen to this, the group, not the teams, the group with more series wins, as though it's like a Ryder Cup and we're playing on teams against each other, will be named Winners Group, while the other will be named Losers Group. So because T1 lost a single series, they were in the Losers Group, even though Gen.G lost twice. So already, what a silly competition this is, thanks to the format. Then, the group with more series wins, the winners group, the top 3 from the winners group advance to the playoffs, the bottom 2 from the losers group, and the top 4 of the winners group, and the top 4 go to a play-in. So that meant, as a result, by the way, D+, Gen.G, and KT all, so KT as well, who was 3-2, T1 was 4-1, got to all skip playing this play-in. And T1 and Hanwha both went into this play-in where they're playing the bottom 2 teams from that and then the other 3 teams from their group. So you play this bizarre play-in where you play BO3, then 1 BO5 final because you already won a qualification. This is like an LPL regional style format. That meant then you only get access as Nong, Shim and T1 into this where you play the... who would it have been? The 2 teams out of this that weren't top 2 or whatever. Not what am I talking? Yeah. So because T1 ended up having to play Hanwha Life, also bizarrely the team from their group, by the way, and lost in game 5. That was it. They were done in the whole tournament. They could only finish 5th to 6th. That's it. Even though we now know Hanwha Life 3-2'd everyone and won the tournament, and he won first stand. So for all we know, T1 was the second best team in the world and second best team in the LCK. In fact, if you watch them play, Gen.G was a bit sus at this point in the tournament. T1 looked dynamite out the gate. They looked fire. Even Faker was smurfing on motherfuckers. They were just handsing people in fights. It was crazy. The smash element, they were looking sick in the early games. But their tournament ends there. Then we have a double limb format. Okay, I like the double limb format. Remember, in theory, this is the LCK playoffs, right? Double limb format, it's all good. Gen.G did a bracket run, but they couldn't win the game 5 in Failure, so Hanwha Life got to go to first stand and win it. So, okay, kind of a bit of a bomber, right? We can't know if T1 was as good. We didn't get the proper bracket thing because T1 bizarrely had these hoops to jump through, which seemed unfair, quite frankly. Already that's a problem for me, but okay, we can put that to one side for a moment. Then we went to what used to be the spring split, right? But now it's called LCK 2025 rounds 1 to 2. Because do you remember in the LCS years ago, I mean, they even did it, I think, in like 2020 or something. They like combined spring and summer. So they had playoffs for spring, but your regular season results from spring counted into summer. Hence, famously, well, like I think it was like TSM or something, was like super high up, but then actually lost loads of games, but it didn't matter, they decayed slowly. Something along those lines, I seem to remember. Basically, you play a massive round robin. Okay, great. It's like a normal LCK spring regular split, right? So you play it all out. Gen.G did a perfect split. Amazing shit. After a perfect split, you want to see, can they have a perfect in terms of match wins? Playoffs, right? Problem is, the playoffs wasn't a playoffs. It was called Road to MSI, and it was just a giant LCK regional, a la the LPL regional. You know, in the LPL regional, you have like what looks like a single limb bracket, but actually the upper match is the higher seeds. The winner of that qualifies and doesn't go to the final of the regional. The winner of the lower match goes to the final, which is the last chance to get to the international and a lower seed than the winner of the upper match. That's what they did here. So they just made Gen.G and Hanwha Life, who were the top 2 teams in the split. They just played an upper match. So this part alone would be the regional of the LPL. They played this, which was just a qualification. Because Gen.G won 3-2, barely, by the way. They had to like reverse sweep. They got the first seed. Meanwhile, KT and T1, etc., were playing this gauntlet style, which is almost the old format, going back into like 2022 and, back into 2020 and before to 2015 rather, where you played just a gauntlet. So T1 climbed the gauntlet, smashed Hanwha Life, who looked like they almost could have beaten Gen.G, and then there was no final. We didn't get T1 against Gen.G. Gen.G just gets the first seed for MSI, and T1 gets the second seed, which fucking sucked. This was whack. I mean, first of all, you destroyed all the hype that existed in that moment for T1 against Gen.G. That means Chovy gets denied a chance to beat T1 in another final, and you don't get an extra title for Chovy. This is not a title. I know Dorm and I sort of say it's an unofficial title. It's not an official LCK title. It meant that T1 could never have been the first seed at MSI because they didn't place top 2 in the rounds 1 to 2. Even though in the old format of LCK, in theory, you can win the league even if you're like the 5th seed or whatever. I mean, T1's actually done it as lower seeds if people don't know. It also meant you had no stadium event with the big production for the finals, which would be epic with Caster Kim giving you all the intro and all the trash talk, which means you just miss out on one. Here's the thing, you've taken a game out of your system that would be the biggest viewership of the year to that point. Especially because it was T1 versus Gen.G. That's guaranteed box office. That is the match that when they had it in the 4th place decider for the fucking World Championship in summer was the most viewed game at that point in time. Over things like the final, as far as I know. Then after that, MSI took place, EWC took place. You had the rounds 3 to 5, which is the extended regular season, because there's one regular season now. So you add all the records together. So this is 29-1, but that includes the 18 and 0. So what happens is, you play it this time, this is the one portion I like. The one portion I like. Because what they did is copy the LPL's format for the last couple of years, where what you do is after the first season, I mean, they do it with a placement tournament, but they used the first season for this. You divide into 2 groups. One's the Legend group, one's the Rise group. In the LPL, that's called the Ascend group and the Nirvana group. Basically, it's the good teams in one group playing each other more times, and that's the bad teams playing each other more times, and a couple of teams escape that and can go like through sort of a plane to get into the playoffs anyway. So this meant, even though Gen.G lost once, they lost to T1 obviously after EWC, They did win all the other series and had a very, very impressive series. Only lost 11 total games and one series. And they lost once to T1 and they 3-0'd everyone else. The best teams in Korea. So obviously that part was dope. Yeah, isn't that awesome? It actually makes it more impressive and hard to go undefeated. That part's all great. Then we came to, as I say, the teams from the Rise group got to go to a play-in. So we had a play-in. The 2 matches to decide which 2 teams get to join the playoffs. It ended up being FearX, not Nongshim, who was an upper team. And Damwon didn't make it through that portion, even though they were the best Rise team. Then Damwon beat Nongshim, also from the upper thing, the Legends group, to also get the last spot. So then we go into the season playoffs. Now, it's double elimination, so you might think, yeah, this is good. It is. This is all good. This is excellent. By the way, I know it looks bigger because they added on this match here. Because before, when you lost here, you were out of the tournament, weren't you, in the playoffs of LCK or even the LCK Cup? Because there's now a lower bracket aspect with the playing teams who played each other. Then you come along and you have this giant lower bracket. In theory, you've made an even bigger playoffs. I like that idea, especially if we had 2 splits of this a year. The problem now, though, is this just qualifies you to Worlds entirely, like LEC. Like first team Gen.G is the first seed, Hanwha Life's the second seed, KT's the third seed, and T1's the fourth seed, because that is first, second, third, and fourth in the summer playoffs. Now, I don't like that, because I did used to think it was cool that this is just for the championship, and then the teams that weren't there would go into the regional and play each other there as well, so they could prove that they got the spot and battle for the different seeding, etc., which wasn't necessarily affected by the regular split, because obviously the regular split could be ages past in the meta, and things could have changed with the teams, etc. So not perfect, but certainly very, very good. Now, though, we come to an issue I have, which is the major issue with the summer split is that's the one title that counts in LCK. So this year, Chovy, who in theory could have won 3 titles if LCK Cup and if there was a spring finals, but he just didn't win the LCK Cup, he could have won 2 titles this year or 3. He can only now, for the entire year, win 1 title no matter what. And he even could have gone 29-1 in the regular season and just lost this one and had 0 titles this year. That doesn't make sense because now you've devalued LCK titles. You could argue you've made them more valuable, but you've also made it so you haven't, because people are going to do it in an absolute sense in the same way as they talk about how many people have won the Champions League or World Cups and they ignore what the format was like, what the qualification process was like, etc., etc., etc. To me, it doesn't make sense now to count all LCK titles equally. Like Faker in OGN used to be able to win 3 titles a year in theory. In LCK used to win 2 titles a year until now. Chovy can now only win 1 per year, and in his entire career had a chance to win 2 per year max in the LCK because he only joined it, remember, in 2018. So Chovy now has like 5 LCK titles by winning all but 2 over the last 4 years of play. Faker has 10 LCK titles, but has played way more tournaments, and especially way more tournaments relative to a shorter span of time than Chovy will have to play. Faker had a chance at 5 titles in his first 2 years. Then he had a shot at 20 titles overall in 10 years. After that, beyond champions, moving into LCK. So in his 12 years, he could have won 25 titles. You do the math, Chovy couldn't have even come close to that if he'd won every single split. So what are we doing just counting the raw trophies? Let me give you an LEC example that will enlighten you if you're a European fan. We went from having 2 splits per year in the ULCS/LEC to having 4 because we had the 3, the winter, spring, summer, and then we had a regional finals, aka the season final. Now, Perks was the most decorated player in history at one point in time. He had 8 LEC/EULCS titles from 2016 to 2020 by winning 8 of 10 splits. Yike joined the LEC in 2023 and won 7 titles, 1 less than Perks, in only 2 years of play by winning 7 out of 8 available titles. It doesn't make sense to count LEC titles equally. So could you say this year's LCK season playoffs counts as 2 titles? You could, but even then it's not ideal because it's not the same as winning 2 separate playoff runs, is it? So in a way it's hard. It's harder in the sense you have to win that one time, but it's also harder to win 2 separate times, if you know what I mean. So it doesn't even work in that sense. That's why you have devalued history and the whole argument, because fans will look at an absolute number, not the eye test and not what happened in the context. Now, what's the solution? The solution is obvious to me. If you want to make it historically cogent, I would have to go, okay, T1, you win. LCK Cup is a pre-season tournament. That's still awesome. Make it a better round format than that dog shit with the fucking winners group thing. And it just qualifies you to a first stand or whatever the name of the first international tournament is. Then have Spring be the same format, even make it qualify to the Legends and the Rise group if you want, but have a proper playoffs and have it be double elim. Or just call it the mid-season championship and then call the summer one the overall season championship and therefore make the summer one more important. In a way, it was more important anyway, but actually a lot of people count them as equal, don't they? So you could say one counts more for history. LEC, by the way, didn't do that when they had the season final. What they failed to do in the last 2 years was, because the season final was less teams and just came right after the summer finals, it just felt like a weird regional. You were just playing out with the same teams that were the best already. You didn't make it essentially the summer championship, which it should have been probably, instead of the LEC summer split. That's their problem they did there, because as a result, they didn't build the same hype towards it and the same significance, even though, yes, it did qualify you to Worlds. If people forget, it was more like a regional. It didn't feel like a championship, though, did it? It felt like some sort of a gauntlet, as it were. So I think this sucks. And worst of all, it's completely unnecessary. You've taken out some of the biggest viewership matches, some of the most important for history, and you've just fucked with actually the consistent narrative of what the league is and what you compete for. I know you've got a competition that sort of doesn't count, but does count at the same time. I mean, look, you get to represent Korea and potentially win a national tournament for Korea. That's a big fucking deal. That's why TS is being hated on over in China, even when they win splits, because they ruined themselves internationally and made a fool of themselves, didn't they? So I think it's so necessary. You would gain so much more by making some simple changes or not making the fucked up changes they made this year. So I certainly hope going forwards, they will change that. Now, you know you never catch me dolo online because I'm rolling deep and we dem boys. Who am I talking about? The Skrilluminati. So this video and the content on my channel is kindly supported by Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Thooorin, Jensen Goh, Nicky, Jasun. You know who my second in command is. Jerky's minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my content? Would you like to ask me a question in an AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where you get to set the topic? Maybe you want to see who upcoming guests are in my interviews and on my talk shows. Well, all of these perks and more are available to you if you put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today. How? Via the Patreon link in the description box below. You dig?